Joe Davis, and I'm a software architect at Home Depot. You may have heard of us. I've been told we sell hammers or something. So what I'm going to talk about really quick is a story of what we went through in implementing microservices from the beginning, the whys. So about a year ago, I started at the company up here in Vancouver called the Home Depot Quote Center. And what we had there was basically a Gordian knot of code. If you've probably already seen those where your code is all interdependent in each other, and even worse, we had Gordian knots of databases that were linked to each other and interdependent on each other, and facing the workload that we had to take on in the future that we knew that was not going to scale. So we had needed some way that we could decouple our code. And we started looking into microservices. So about half and half. So basically, for the people who don't know, microservices is basically taking services, scaling them down so that they're easier to maintain and deploy. And they're generally based around a particular business activity. And if you want more information on microservices, then I encourage you to go to Martin Fowler's blog on ThoughtWorks. And he has a lot more information with other authors up there. But in creating microservices, the question is, how small is small? And the most smart-ass answer you can possibly get is just small enough and no smaller. And believe it or not, that is actually the advice that you get from the book on microservices. There's not a whole lot of information about how to decompose your current services into microservices. And that's what we don't have, is a decomposition pattern. So I went to the O'Reilly Software Architecture Conference last month in Boston. And it was all about microservices. Day two, the joke was, if you didn't know what microservices were at that point, then you're lost, because every single talk was on microservices or reactive systems. How to scale them, how to log them, how to secure them. But the question is, what do we put in them? What makes a microservice, and how do we separate it from another microservice and make sure that they're not dependent on each other? The biggest mistake that I've seen is people just take their existing services and move their endpoints over into a new service, and really that gives you nothing more than perhaps a smaller service that then is easier to deploy and you can maintain in a separate space. Problem is, then you're going to multiply your versioning problems and other issues. So what I want to see people do is, number one, if you're moving to microservices, stop doing CRUD in your services, all right? Doing CRUD in your services is just graduating your data access layer up to your client, and that's no good. That won't scale. And it has no representation of what your actual business processes are. So I want people to actually start taking some time before they move to microservices and evaluate why they've designed their APIs the way they have, and what is the effect of change on those services. So I say make the most of reactive systems. You want to be able to use messaging and event sourcing. You want to get decoupled. So what you'll want to do is focus on business activities. Instead of saying update order, blah, 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 say submit order, say tender order, something like that, where you can actually follow in your logging exactly what caused the change instead of just that a change occurred. Look into domain-driven design. Domain-driven design is a great pattern. How many people know domain-driven design? Eric Evans' book. All right. Von Vernon wrote the follow-up to that, Implementing, and then he's working on another one called Reactive Messaging with Scala and Akka. So the problem is, with all of that was going on at the Software Architecture Conference, there was no talk, not a single one, on how to actually design your APIs. It was all about your implementation and how do you scale it and how to make it faster. And the biggest problem people are going to face is in 2 to 5 years, you're going to be in the same situation you are today because you just kicked the can down the road and you didn't identify how to decompose your services. So I suggest that at some point somebody needs to build a microservices framework. We don't have one, and Web API does not do it. It's just another way to deploy services. What we need is something that actually defines specific queue, event, and message objects. We need something that is opinionated around process maintenance instead of code maintenance. And we need something that can integrate with message buses by convention. So I'll just leave you with this. Building your process-driven microservices on a purpose-built platform will add years to your API, because you will be able to change with your business as they change, and you won't be stuck just implementing the newest tool just because it's newer.
Thank you, Joe. That was at 4:56. That was really, really good.